I never thought I'd be the guy posting on a relationship advice forum, but here I am. My wife, let's call her Lisa, is a journalist, always traveling for work. At first, it seemed glamorous, her on the road, chasing stories, interviewing important people. Meanwhile, I was the guy at home, managing everything, keeping our life stable while she lived this exciting double life of press conferences and deadlines. We've been married for 7 years. Not a lifetime, but long enough to have a routine, you know? We had this unspoken agreement. She would work her tail off, traveling all over, while I handled the house, the bills, the planning. Sure, I was a little more structured, maybe a bit obsessive about details, but it worked. Or at least I thought it did. Now, looking back, the signs were all there, weren't they? But you never want to think your wife, the woman you promised your life to, is sleeping with someone else. Not until you see something that snaps you out of your little domestic daydream. For me, it was her travel bags. She kept these bags always packed, just in case she had to leave on short notice. Nothing odd there, at least at first. But let me set the scene. It was a regular morning, and I had just finished my shower. I reached for a cotton swab to clean my ears, only to find we were out. No big deal, right? I remembered Lisa always kept extra toiletries in her travel bags. So I went to grab a few swabs from her stash. Seemed innocent enough. That's when I found them, the condoms and lube. Now, I know what you're thinking. Maybe they were for us, right? Wrong. We never used condoms. And lube. Not something we ever needed. That moment, standing there holding those things, everything about our life suddenly felt like a lie. My heart sank. There was no other explanation. She was cheating. But here's the thing, I didn't confront her right away. No, I needed proof. Real evidence. I didn't want her to wriggle out of this with some lame excuse. So, I did what any man in my position would do. I hired a private investigator. I wish I could say the private investigator found nothing, that it was all just some terrible misunderstanding, but that's not how life works, is it? The PI was good, really good. Within a week, he had pictures, phone logs, hotel receipts. It was all laid out in front of me like some twisted documentary about my life. Every time she said she was on a business trip, there was another guy with her. His name was Jeff, and apparently, they had been seeing each other for months. I wasn't prepared for how much it would hurt. You think when you see something coming, you can brace for the impact, but no. Nothing can prepare you for the moment your suspicions become reality. Every picture he showed me was like another nail in the coffin of our marriage. Jeff, the guy I'd never heard about, suddenly became the shadow hanging over my life. Lisa's work trips, the ones that kept her away so often, were really just romantic getaways for her and this clown. And the worst part? She didn't even bother to hide it that well. A new hotel every time, dinners at fancy restaurants, hand-holding, laughing, it was all there in full color, staring back at me. I remember the PI saying something like, "Sorry, man. I hate to be the bearer of bad news." But honestly, what was he apologizing for? He wasn't the one betraying me. I spent that night sitting in the dark with a bottle of whiskey, staring at those photos. I couldn't look away. My mind was racing. How long had she been planning this? Was it all a lie from the beginning? Had she ever loved me, or was I just the sucker who provided stability while she gallivanted around with her little boy toy? I wanted to storm into her office, throw the pictures in her face, scream at her for humiliating me like this. But I knew better. I needed to play it smart. I needed a plan. The next day, I took a step I never thought I'd take. I booked a hotel room. Not for some affair, but to set the perfect trap. I knew exactly where Lisa and Jeff would be staying on their next trip. I had all the details thanks to my trusty PI. I reserved a room right next to theirs, same floor, same days. They wouldn't even know I was there. And that's when my plan really came together. I had to make her feel the humiliation she had been dishing out to me for months. So I returned to her precious travel bags, the ones she kept packed for her spontaneous rendezvous. I carefully took the bottle of lube and added something special to it, pepper spray. You see, pepper spray can do a real number when it comes into contact with certain sensitive areas. Let's just say I was going to make sure their little love fest didn't go as smoothly as planned. I put everything back exactly as I found it, zipped up her bag, and waited for the inevitable. The day finally arrived. Lisa packed her bags like clockwork, kissed me goodbye with that fake, cheerful smile she'd perfected over the years, and headed off for her business trip. I gave her a little wave, playing the doting husband, while inside, I was counting the minutes until her little charade would blow up in her face. I arrived at the hotel a couple of hours before they were due to check in. The room was perfect, just one door down from theirs. I had a view of the hallway, and I knew I'd hear every move they made. Now, I'm not the type to spy on people, but in this case, it felt like justice. I wasn't about to let them sneak away unscathed. As I sat in my room, I kept playing out in my head what would happen next. Lisa and Jeff would walk in, all over each other as usual. They'd tear open her bag, grab the lube, and, well, let's just say the rest of their evening would be a lot less romantic than they planned. Sure enough, they arrived around 8 p.m., giggling like teenagers as they made their way down the hallway. My heart was pounding. The whole thing felt surreal. Here was my wife, the woman I'd built my life with, walking hand in hand with another man like she didn't have a care in the world. They didn't even bother to check the surroundings. No guilt, no hesitation, just straight to their room. I waited for a few minutes, listening to the muffled sounds of them talking, the click of the door shutting. Then it went quiet. My mind raced. Would they find the pepper spray right away? Would they even use it? I held my breath, imagining the moment they'd realize what was happening. And then it began. First, it was a sharp gasp, Lisa's voice. At first, I thought maybe I was imagining things, but then the gasping turned into coughing, then full-blown screaming. "What the hell?" I heard Jeff yell, his voice hoarse and panicked. I almost laughed, but I bit my lip. This was their moment, not mine. I wanted to enjoy every second of it. They were scrambling around, the door rattling as they fumbled with the lock. But here's the kicker, I'd prepped for that too. Earlier that day, I'd wedged a small paperclip into the keyhole of their door. It was just enough to jam it so they couldn't unlock it easily. They were trapped, in more ways than one. I could hear them thrashing around, Lisa's high-pitched screams mixing with Jeff's angry grunts. I knew they were in pain. The pepper spray was working exactly as planned. The thought of them suffering the consequences of their little rendezvous made my heart race in a way that almost felt satisfying. Finally, I heard them pounding on the door, yelling for help. "Call the front desk." "I can't breathe," Jeff shouted, his voice strained with panic. Lisa was crying by now, her usual composed, manipulative self completely shattered. It was beautiful, in a twisted way. I stepped out into the hallway, acting like I was just a concerned guest. I could hear Lisa and Jeff still trying to get out of the room, still pleading for help. The hotel staff arrived, trying to unlock the door with a spare key, but they struggled thanks to my little sabotage. It took them a few minutes, but it felt like hours as I stood there, pretending to be a curious bystander. When the door finally swung open, Jeff and Lisa bolted out like they were running from a fire. Lisa's eyes were red and swollen, her face a twisted mix of pain and terror. And then she saw me. In that moment, it was like the world stopped. Her expression shifted from confusion to pure horror. She knew. She knew I'd orchestrated this. And she knew I wasn't the clueless husband she thought she could keep fooling. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. I just turned around and walked away. Walking away from that hotel felt like stepping out of someone else's life. I thought I'd feel triumphant, like I'd won some grand battle. And yeah, there was a part of me that relished seeing Lisa's panic-stricken face, the look of utter defeat as she realized the game was up. But once I was alone, back in my car, reality hit me like a freight train. She was my wife. The woman I'd built my life around, the one I thought I'd grow old with. For years, I had put her on a pedestal, made excuses for her late nights, her disinterest in our marriage, her little lies. I was the guy who handled everything. The house, the bills, the life we'd built. And she was out there, betraying me without a second thought, laughing with some loser in a hotel while I sat at home like an idiot. I couldn't even cry at first. I just felt numb. You spend years thinking you know someone, thinking that loyalty and love are enough to hold it all together. But the truth is like a sledgehammer. It smashes everything you thought was real into a million pieces, and all you're left with is the rubble. I'd been so focused on catching her in the act, proving her betrayal, that I hadn't fully prepared myself for what came after. Sitting in that car, I started to replay everything in my head, the late nights, the little lies, the way she brushed off things that mattered to me. All the times I convinced myself I was overreacting, that I was just being paranoid. It all seemed so obvious now, like I should have seen it coming a mile away. But when you're in it, when you're blinded by love, you don't want to see it. You make excuses because the alternative, admitting that your wife is cheating on you, is too much to handle. The anger came next. White-hot, searing anger. How could she do this to me? How could she lie, day in and day out, and then come home and pretend like everything was fine? What kind of person is capable of that level of deceit? I wanted to scream, to punch something, to drive straight to Jeff's place and knock his teeth out. But what would that accomplish? It wouldn't change what she did. It wouldn't erase the betrayal or the fact that my marriage had been a sham for who knows how long. And then, underneath all that anger, there was sadness. Not just for the loss of my marriage, but for the loss of the life I thought we had. The future I'd been building in my head for years, the one where Lisa and I grew old together, where we made it through the hard times and came out stronger on the other side, that future was gone. Dead. And it wasn't coming back. I spent that night on the couch, the same couch where Lisa and I had spent so many nights watching movies, laughing, talking about our plans for the future. Except now, the house felt hollow. Every picture on the wall, every piece of furniture felt like a reminder of what I'd lost. I didn't sleep much. My mind wouldn't shut off, replaying the moment Lisa saw me in the hallway, her face contorting with the realization that I knew everything. I thought about confronting her again, about asking her why. Why, Jeff? Why the lies? Why throw everything away for some cheap fling? But deep down, I knew the answer didn't matter. Even if she told me, even if she tried to explain herself, it wouldn't change what she'd done. The damage was already too deep. By morning, I knew what I had to do. There was no saving this marriage. There was no working through it. Lisa had crossed a line, and there was no going back. As much as it hurt, as much as I wanted to cling to the life we'd built, I knew I deserved better. I deserved the truth, the kind of loyalty I'd always given her but never received in return. So I made my decision. I filed for divorce that very afternoon. Filing for divorce was easier than I expected, emotionally, at least. The paperwork itself was a mess, but I was resolute. I couldn't spend another day pretending we had a future. By the time I submitted the papers, I felt a strange sense of calm. Like, finally, I was doing something for myself. For too long, I'd been the guy holding it all together, making excuses for Lisa's absences and her aloofness, trying to preserve the image of a perfect marriage. But now, I was done with that. When Lisa found out I'd filed, she came home in a frenzy. She burst through the door, her usual cool and collected demeanor replaced by something frantic, desperate. "You filed for divorce," she spat out, like the words tasted sour in her mouth. "You're really doing this?" I didn't flinch. "What did you expect, Lisa? That I'd just let you cheat on me and we'd go back to normal?" Her face twisted with anger. "It's not like that. Jeff, he doesn't mean anything. I was stressed, we were fighting and—" I cut her off. "So that's your excuse? You were stressed, so you decided to screw another guy?" She crossed her arms, her eyes narrowing. "You've been distant for months, always working late, always criticizing me. What did you expect? I needed someone who appreciated me." I couldn't help but laugh, a cold, bitter laugh. "Appreciated you? I worked my ass off to keep this marriage going while you were off having your little trysts. Don't turn this around on me." She had the audacity to scoff, rolling her eyes like she was the victim. "You don't understand, do you? You never understood what I needed." 5. That was it. That's when I realized how deep her selfishness ran. She wasn't sorry. She didn't regret what she'd done. In her mind, this was all my fault. I was the one who had failed her. It was infuriating, but at the same time, it made things clear. I didn't need closure from her. I didn't need an apology. She was never going to give me one because, in her twisted reality, she didn't believe she was in the wrong. I took a deep breath, feeling more at peace than I had in months. "Lisa, this is over. I don't care what your excuses are. You made your choices, and now you'll have to live with them." She looked at me, stunned, like she couldn't believe I was walking away. "You're just going to throw everything away? Just like that?" I nodded. No, you threw everything away. I'm just cleaning up the mess. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. I knew that was the last time I'd see her like that, in our house, pretending we were still a couple. The locks were changed that evening. She was out of my life for good. The months after the divorce were strange, like learning to walk again. There was a lot to untangle: joint accounts, the house, our so-called shared life. But bit by bit, I dismantled what was left of our marriage. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when I missed the idea of her, the person I thought I married. But that person didn't exist anymore, if she ever did. I started seeing a therapist, which, honestly, was one of the best decisions I've ever made. At first, I felt stupid, like I was admitting defeat by seeking help. But it wasn't about defeat. It was about rebuilding. Slowly, I started to find myself again, beyond the husband, beyond the role I'd played in Lisa's life. I started to enjoy things again: reading, running, even just going out for drinks with friends without the weight of our failing marriage hanging over me. The strangest part was how much I learned about myself through all of this. I realized how much of my identity had been wrapped up in keeping things together, being the provider, the stable one. But now, with no one to manage, no one to please, I had the freedom to just be me. And that was more liberating than I ever expected. People always ask, "How did you not see it coming?" And I've thought a lot about that. The truth is, I didn't want to see it. I ignored the red flags because facing them meant facing a reality I wasn't ready for. But now, on the other side of it all, I've learned that loyalty, love, and respect aren't just things you give, they're things you deserve in return. And if you're not getting them, it's not your fault for wanting more. If there's one thing I can tell anyone reading this, it's this: trust your gut. Don't ignore the signs. Don't make excuses for someone who doesn't respect you. You deserve better, and walking away from something toxic, no matter how much history you have, is never the wrong decision. Looking back, it's almost funny how things ended. The woman I thought I'd grow old with turned out to be someone I didn't even recognize. But I'm better for it. I'm stronger. And most importantly, I'm free. Thank you for visited my YouTube channel. Your support, likes, and comments truly inspire me to create even more engaging content. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. You're a part of this amazing community, and I'm thrilled to share my stories with you. See you in the next video on YouTube.